Okay, so the first presentation title is The Impact of an Embedded Academic Literacy Approach on International Student Transition to an Australian University. So Edward Pember will present on behalf of their team. So take it away, please. Thank you very much. Yeah, Edward, you can start.
Okay, it always helps to unmute yourself, doesn't it? I haven't taught for a term, so I'm a bit out of practice. Hi, everybody. My name's Ed. I'm going to talk today about some research we've done on the impact of embedded academic literacy approach on international student transition to an Australian university. Obviously, it's going to be CQU. My name's Ed Pember. I work at the Academic Learning Centre in Melbourne under lockdown, hence my hair. I've also been in part of the team is Ruth O'Neill and Michael Dzator and June Sanderson, all members of the ALC. I'll apologise for my PowerPoint to begin with. I do love a minimalist PowerPoint, but we're just not going to get there this time. So essentially, I think I'll begin by outlining what the embedded model is and ultimately sort of give some context to what I'm talking about. So we all are aware, I'm sure, that academic literacies are important for students, especially for international students, also for CQU students, you know, a lot of first in family, lower SES, that sort of thing. So academic literacies are ultimately those that incorporate critical thinking, research competency, academic writing conventions, knowledge of how to function at university, really. There's lots more in there, but that's, I figure everybody knows what academic literacy is, so I'll move forward with that. It's been traditionally taught in adjunct workshops, so you may be familiar with Academic Learning Centre workshops. They're voluntary, students can come as they wish. We also offer sort of, you know, one-on-one sessions, appointments. Again, it's voluntary. And my experience is anecdotally that mostly students who are engaged and who want to do better come to the workshop. So it's generally the students that don't really need the help that do come to the workshops because they're keen. That's the adjunct model in academic literacy, embedded model approach terminology. And mostly the literature says that it's essentially ineffective or not that effective. So in recent years, there's been a growth in the academic approach, the embedded approach. And there are three different models to the embedded approach to have a theoretical perspective to talk about it from. We've got the adjunct model, which I've already discussed. You've got the integrated model and the embedded model, or the pure embedded model. So the integrated model, you may also be familiar with. That might be where an academic learning advisor comes into your class and gives a generic workshop in class. So generic referencing on Harvard or APA or what have you, maybe an essay writing or a report writing workshop, but it's not actually focused on the unit content. It's not specifically focused on the assessment that you have in your unit or that students are doing in their unit. So moving into the embedded model, which is what we're doing in the Academic Learning Centre for the last 5 years or so, we've been working quite heavily with creating embedded models. So the pure embedded model really works on the level of having academic learning advisors work very closely with unit coordinators and lecturers, teachers, to create material and resources that are very focused on the unit content. They use discipline language, discipline terminology. The embedded model that we do, you know, focuses on the assignment tasks, and we know the assignment tasks very well. We will have a Moodle site which is specifically geared for that unit, and it sits separately from the main unit site of the unit that we're embedding in, and essentially students can go there, do activities. We come into their class and work with them, depending on what unit we're doing, you know, up to 4 or 5 hours, maybe 6 hours through the whole term, between, you know, 1 hour sessions, 1.5 hour sessions, 3 or 4, 5 times in the term. And we focus on the unit content and the assignments that the students are doing. So that's the embedded model that the ALC has been promoting and doing for the last 5 years. In the literature, there's not much that's solely devoted to international students. There's a lot of research out there, but it generally works with, you know, domestic students, some NESB, non-English speaking background students, but nothing really solely all about international students. So we saw a research gap in there and went for it. What we found from the research, or from the literature, I should say, is that the international and domestic student perceptions from the literature essentially have two sides, obviously positive and negative. So in the positive, students were saying that they enjoyed the embedded sessions because it improved their written work, it improved their understanding of assessment specifications, they improved their research, note-taking, evaluating skills, better paraphrasing, it improved their confidence overall. Students found they generally liked the student-centered activities. All of our embedded approaches are student-centered. That's the whole point. In the literature, it said they wanted more, and they wanted it offered in other units, and that they would recommend the embedded approach to other students. On the negative side, and remembering here we're looking at international and domestic student perceptions from the literature, it was found that, you know, some students felt that time was taken from important unit content. Some of the sessions were too short, so, you know, lots of ideas to get in a small amount of time. Some saw that there was no perceived improvement in their skills, possibly because it was too short. Some said that it was not focused on unit content or discipline content. So again, too generic, a little bit more of that adjunct model rather than embedded. And some students, I would dare say that these were mostly domestic students or native speakers of English, found that the skills development shouldn't be done in class. It's something to do out of class. It's not part of what we're actually teaching in discipline-specific terminology. So that was what the the literature said. And we, my group, this group is a part of a bigger sort of research project into the embedded approach at CQU, and there I see some of my colleagues, hello, out there. What our research group was doing was really trying to understand how what international students' perceptions of the ALC's embedded approach were, and how that impacted on their transition to CQU. We took a mixed method approach to our methodology. We basically broke down from the years 2018 term 1 to 2019 term 3. We took all of the domestic students out of that cohort by visa status and identified 2,161 international students. Of those students, we found, so the qualitative part of the research, the data collection, was ultimately, we took, students do a student evaluation survey. They do it at the beginning of the unit, of the embedded session from the ALC, and they do it at the end of the session as well. So they do that each term. It's basically 11 questions on a Likert scale, you know, not true to very true. And we took data from only 2018 to look at this, the quantitative data. Out of all of those 2,161 students, there were 203 that had completed the test, or, you know, depending on whether you look at the inferential or the descriptive statistics, we did both. So quite a large sample size. We looked at their quantitative answers for those. We also did a qualitative data analysis. We had focus groups. So out of those 2,000 students, we emailed invitations to focus groups. We got about 20 responses out of 2,000, but bearing in mind that some of the students weren't engaged, some of the students may not check their emails, some of the students may not even be at university by the time we were trying to locate them. Out of those 20 that said yes, 12 of them came to focus groups. We had 6 of them, and we got the qualitative data from that. So just quickly, some limitations that I've thought of for this was, you know, really only the engaged students came to focus groups. So we only got positive perceptions. No one who hated us or didn't find it useful came and said, no, you guys stink, which is kind of nice, but, you know, it would have been nice to get a bit more honest feedback, perhaps. There were historical perspectives, so students that came, the focus groups were held in 2019, and they could have done the units at the end of 2018, even in the middle of 2018. So there may have been some memory loss, but in some ways, the focus groups, the data we got from that was quite rich, and it shows that it did have a big impact on them, because they could remember a lot of what we were talking about. Also, the survey questions changed from Term 1 2018 to Term 2, Term 3 for the quantitative data. So we just removed the question that had been changed, and it didn't really affect the data. In terms of the findings, we did inferential and descriptive statistics. Now, I'm not a statistician. I'm not at all that way inclined. So Michael Dzator did the stats for us. Essentially, the inferential statistics, which I'm led to believe are much more powerful and truthful than descriptive statistics, found that most students, and this is from the tests that they did at the beginning and the end of the sessions, found that most students had a perception, and remember it is their perception, that they improved their academic literacies. And we broke it into basically 4 tiers. So the biggest thing that they found they had improved on, or they thought they had improved on, was referencing, and equally evaluating sources, paragraph structure, grammatical sentence writing, planning assignments and note-taking. They had a less greater perception that they had improved at finding sources, but it was still a very significant statistical analysis as a positive. Thirdly, they identified that assessment task analysis was improved. Funnily enough, a lot of students, there was no difference between whether they were committed to improving their academic writing at the beginning, or they were committed at improving their academic writing at the end. So I think that's really interesting, showing that a lot of students aren't really focused on these academic literacies. They really do see them as an extra. They're focused on passing the unit. So I think there's probably another research paper in that. Lastly, the last finding from the questions was, were they confident to write academically? And before and after, there was no statistical difference. So they hadn't actually really become more confident in their writing overall. So that suggests to me that there's not much change in that, and they still need more support. In terms of this descriptive stats, I'm not going to get into it due to time. They are less powerful than the inferential statistics. But it is interesting, these ones are ranked in order of which skills were most improved, and first and second, the skills that were most improved in the statistical descriptive stats was referencing. So there was a big push in all of this research, and you'll see from the next focus group findings that referencing was the biggest thing that they talked about improving, next to evaluating sources and paragraph structure. So really a lot about research and how to integrate research into the writing, which is arguably very, very important. So our focus group findings essentially, found that out of the 12 people that came, all the students very often and repeatedly mentioned that referencing was a super important part of it, that they got a lot of important information about referencing. They also learned a lot about paraphrasing, academic writing, report writing, various other things, evaluating sources, research, analyzing tasks and task management, time management, sorry. They found that they reported that they're still using the skills and the resources that we gave to them in other units. So I thought that was really interesting. The resources that we provided on Moodle, they had downloaded that information and they were using it repeatedly for other units. So these skills, they're taking them across their whole degree, in fact. And one of the people actually talked about how she's going to take time management and things she learned there into her workplace. So I thought that was really interesting. All of the students said that the session improved their grades and their confidence, and they did better in the unit than they thought they would have if they hadn't done them. They all recommended the sessions to all students, whether they're postgrad, undergrad, domestic, international. They said it was a fantastic approach and they really enjoyed it. They also said, importantly, that they think it should be done. Many of them did it in their second or even third term, and they said, look, it really should be done much earlier in their degrees, in the first terms. They acknowledged their cultural differences, the differences between Australia and their home countries, so the transition to from their previous background to the Australian background. And the interesting thing about that was that that wasn't actually a question in the focus groups. They all just, about 50% of them just offered that concept, like, hey, you know, everything's different for us here. This has been really helpful. They did say the Moodle that we created specifically for them could be improved, although some of them thought it was perfect, so you can't really please everybody. I've chucked in some emotive words that came out from those focus groups, and I think the ones that I find really interesting are engaging, motivating, interactive, interesting, and someone said a big thanks to you guys as well. Also, how can you go past perfect? Look at that. How did all of this compare to our literature review and the findings that we found out of the literature? Well, as you can see on the positive side, everything the literature said which was positive, all of our students said was positive in the focus groups and through our qualitative and through the statistical analysis. The negative sides, none of them really said that. They didn't say that it wasn't important. They didn't say that it didn't improve their skills. They all said it was very focused on the unit content. It wasn't generic. And essentially they said this, some of them said the sessions were too short, which you could take as a positive, meaning they want more, and we didn't give them what they wanted, really. So essentially it was very positive feedback and positive information. And ultimately, in conclusion, I would say that, you know, the positive side is, I think we proved quite emphatically that students perceived the ALC embedded sessions as useful, well implemented, well designed, and that they improved their academic literacies because of those sessions, and it greatly helped them to transition to university in Australia. Negatives, yeah, the Moodle could be improved, but again, we can't please everybody. Students did say in the focus groups that there should be more activities and more self-help stuff. We've implemented that since 2018, but I think we could still do more on that. But it was only the super keen students that wanted that. We could extend the duration and frequency of the sessions, but it really depends on the unit itself, on the unit coordinators, and the assessments that are associated with that unit. Recommendations that I've made out of this is really that we should implement embedded sessions in all core units at the university and very early on in their courses, in their programs, so in their first terms. Students said that it should be compulsory for everybody. They were really keen on it. We also said that I also recommend that we when we do embedded sessions, that they align totally with the assignments, so that the ALC can embed into the unit focused on the assignments, because that gets buy-in from all stakeholders. It makes us more motivated. It engages the students because they see the reason they should do it, and the unit coordinators and markers have an easier time because it essentially, I think, makes the work of a higher quality. So that's it. I've squeezed in my reference list. Sorry that it's a bit small, but it's there. That's pretty much me. Are there any questions? I'm sorry if I went like a machine gun, but I'm done.
That's all right. Thank you very much, Edward. It was a very, very interesting talk, and I would welcome questions from anybody who has anything. But just before that, I have a comment, if I may, please. This recommendation that the ALC embedding should be in one of the early units is actually such a genuine recommendation, because I can imagine how useful that would be. I came to Australia as an undergraduate student myself, and I had no idea about referencing. And you see how referencing came up as one of the top things that the students learned, or they benefited from your services in this ALC embedding. So I think I can resonate to a lot of it. So well done, and I would welcome any questions if you have anyone. Couple of questions we can take.
The whole ALC team, and I can see Val there, my boss, my supervisor, we've been working really hard on this. This was for a School of Education, Engineering and Technology, but we do embed in lots of other units, and we are quite packed and busy with it, but I think it's very effective. Thank you very much, everyone.
May I make a comment? It's Danielle here. I'm from the School of Nursing, and the ALC is embedded in all our first year units, academic subjects, and they are invaluable. I can't tell you how much our students appreciate it and us as lecturers. So thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Danielle. And that will be coming out as a research paper, probably next year it will be published.
That's wonderful. Any other quick question before we move on to the next presentation?
Yeah, hi, it's Byron here. Full transparency, I'm a colleague of Ed's. Well done, mate. Terrific job. One comment I wanted to make, and I'd be interested if what you think too, or anyone else, Ed. I see a lot of correlations between what mature age students and returning to study, or those who haven't had tertiary study experience, in terms of the skills that they sort of need. I see a lot of correlation between international students and that cohort also. Things like the referencing, things like academic writing, conventions and so forth.
Yeah, look, I totally agree. I think similar to Jahan, I went to university as a mature age student and I had no idea. So, you know, I really would have benefited from ALC. And I think, yeah, it's useful at every university, but in particular ours. I'm aware of the time, so I think let's move on. Thank you, everybody, for thoughts and comments, and I'll take any more at the end if I can.